You're listening to the Metrics Maven podcast, the show for solopreneurs ready to stop guessing and start growing. Overwhelm as a solopreneur is real. It's something we all experience from time to time in our business. However, when we're living in a constant state of overwhelm, that can really slow down our business growth. And in today's episode, we really want to unpack that. And I have the perfect guest expert for you. Dearmon Kornick is a time management coach who is on a mission to help busy professionals like you stop feeling overwhelmed and start spending time on what matters most. Now, Anna, it really seems like we are living in this constant state of overwhelm, especially when we are a solopreneur, wearing all of the hats in our business, throw in life, and it's just crazy. What's causing this?
Yeah, Amy, one of the biggest misconceptions about overwhelm is that it's based on how many hours we're working. That, oh my, I'm so overwhelmed and I'm working all the time. So I must be overwhelmed because I'm working so much. And especially with solopreneurs, because like you said, we're wearing all the hats. We're the CEO, the CFO, the CMO, and we're the janitor. So I mean, it's no surprise that we're constantly feeling overwhelmed. But actually, overwhelm comes from splitting our attention in too many directions. It's kind of like imagining your attention as a piece of pie or as a pie or a pizza. And the more we divide our attention, the smaller and smaller those slivers get, to the point that when you try to have a teeny tiny sliver of pizza, you can't even taste the good stuff. And that's kind of the way that we show up when we're overwhelmed, because we have divided our attention in so many different directions, whether it's creating multiple new offers in our business at once while taking on the PTO mom responsibility and trying to keep up with our shows and maybe have a 15-minute conversation with our husband once in a while. We feel like we're all over the place, and our attention is in more demand now than ever before. There are entire departments of startups in Silicon Valley that are charged with keeping us addicted and on their platforms. So we are constantly having to fight to make our attention our own.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love that pizza analogy because you're right. We are so spread thin. We're trying to do all of the things all of the time. And, part of it is for so long, multitasking was like this skill,
Yeah.
right? In order to be successful, you've got to be able to do it all and all of it really well right now. But you're right. When we're spread so thin, then we can't even get to the good stuff. And we just end up in this endless reactive mode.
That's
And
true.
especially being a mom, especially, with kids, it's hard. It's so hard and it's frustrating. Now, because you are a time management coach, you know how to navigate this. But have you ever struggled with overwhelm
Oh my,
yourself?
oh my goodness. Amy, are you kidding me? Of course. Of course. That is literally the reason why I became a time management coach. So my very first job right out of college, I was a scheduler to a United States congressman. And that really thrust me into this world of managing someone else's time while trying to learn how to manage my own as a brand new professional. And I loved living and working on the Hill in DC, but we talked about it before we hit record. I'm a Louisiana girl. It is Mardi Gras right now as we are recording this, and I missed home. And so I moved back where I worked in crisis communications and government affairs for 10 years. And we're talking hurricanes, oil spills. We're talking plant explosions. I navigated a nonprofit embezzlement scheme once. I mean, crazy stuff. And every single day was fresh chaos. And here's the thing, I was really good at navigating all of this chaos. But I'm sure you can imagine that when you're working in crisis situations and you're working not just with companies or organizations, but you're supporting people. You're supporting people who are going through the toughest time in their lives. And in an effort to be there fully for the people that I was supporting, I was not there for myself. So cue the overwhelm, cue the overwork, and the complete lack of self care and erosion of my relationships. Overwhelmed? Oh, yes, ma'am, 100%. To the point that I just kind of had to throw my hands up and say that this is not the life that I want for myself. This is not it. I do not want to continue on this trajectory. And so I walked away from what my family, my friends thought was this really fancy career that I had. And it was terrifying. But, Amy, I knew that, first of all, there had to be a way out of it. And I was determined to figure out what it was. I was determined to get back to living my values and creating the life that I wanted. And once I figured that out, I can't just keep that to myself. I've got to share it with as many people as possible. And so when I tell you, I know what it feels like to be almost smothered by the feeling of overwhelm. I get it. I've been there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being just so open and vulnerable about it because a lot of people don't talk about this. And we're thriving amongst the chaos so much so that it becomes the norm.
Mhm.
And we're just like, well, I've got this really successful career. Now I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And so we're just perpetuating this cycle of self-imposed like reality that doesn't have to be in this state of constant overwhelm. So I would love to know like what did you do about that when you recognized, you know what, this is not good. Like I
Mhm.
am being like you said smothered.
Yeah.
How did you navigate your way out of that?
Oh my goodness. I wish I could tell you that I snapped my fingers and life was perfect, but that would be no fun. When I look back on that time, I had a loose plan for what was next, but I really wasn't sure. And for the first time in my life, I didn't really have a solid plan. And that was scary for me because I'm an Enneagram 3. I've always been very goal oriented and plan driven. And so everyone who asked me, so what are you doing next? I would tell them something different. I would give everyone a different answer just to try on different possibilities. And that exercise of trial and error is what continued. I mean, I look at that period, that very messy exploratory period in my life of getting out of overwhelm and moving on to what was next to a destination that I couldn't see at that point as tons of trial and error and learning and taking in as much as I could. I've always been someone who, when I want to learn something, I'm going to find a book about it. I'm sure that, I mean, all of us, we're solopreneurs. That's what we do. YouTube University, we buy a book, we buy another book, we get an Audible subscription. And that was really where I was. And one book about goal setting would then lead me to a book about habits, which would then lead me to a book about managing your energy, which would then lead me to a book about entrepreneurship. And it's almost like they were multiplying because another author would be referenced and it would send me down another path. And little by little, I started to put together the pieces. Because if you think about it, there are books about habits, there are books about your energy, there are books about all of these different individual topics. And in order and each one of those books individually, they're wonderful, but they don't have all the answers, right? And that's not what they're not meant to have all the answers. But we need to take all of these different pieces and concepts and roll them into the way that we design our life. And so, like I said, little by little, I started to put together the pieces and realize that, well, first, I've got to have a vision. And I may not know exactly and clearly what that's going to look like, what the end goal is, but I can create a vision for the way I want to feel and the type of day that I want to have and where I want to live and how I want to recharge and spend time with friends and family and myself. And then I realized, okay, well, I've got that vision. Well, now I need a plan. How are we going to roll priorities and planning and goal setting into this? Okay, but now that we've got the goals and the priorities, how do we be consistent? How do we actually execute this on a daily basis? And what I realized is that there's not just one silver bullet answer to getting yourself out of overwhelm. It takes being still, it takes trial and error, and it takes approaching your life as if you have a toolbox by your side, knowing that at any moment you can solve any problem by pulling something from your toolbox. And it's not going to be the same tool every time, because installing a new habit isn't always going to be the answer. Monitoring your energy isn't always going to be the answer, but it's a possibility. And so by paying attention and using trial and error, getting really clear with myself, who I am at my core, um, and assembling a toolbox of habits, energy, attention, recharge, and time. Um, I suddenly over time, how funny is that? I really began to feel capable and confident and able to share that with others. And I'm really grateful for that messy time. So glad that I lived that in the moment. I certainly didn't feel that way, but I mean, think about just what is now on the other side made it all worth it.
Yeah. It's so cool to reflect back on the journey, isn't it? Just to really appreciate, I got honest with myself and I made a choice to make a change.
Mhm.
And that's scary. And so many of us never do. We
Yeah.
get into the mode where you were in, where you were consuming all of the information. You were reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts, but you did something that most people don't. And you got into action. And that's where it's scary. That's where it's nerve-wracking and hard. But until we actually take the time to do what you did and get into action, but really even before we do that, getting clear on
Mhm.
how do I want to feel?
Mhm.
What do I want my life to look like? We forget that we have a choice. And it's just crazy to me being on this side of things. I look back and I was stuck for years in a career that, like you, it no longer served me. I was
Mhm.
making great money. I got all these accolades, but at the same time, I wasn't fulfilled anymore. So
Mhm.
I took a leap of faith. I made a choice to make a change. And looking back, yeah, there were a lot of mistakes I made, but I really had to get clear on exactly what it was
Mhm.
that I wanted. So I knew that, okay, as I'm taking action, is this leading me towards that goal?
Right.
And along the way, we do make mistakes. We make lots of mistakes, but if we can learn from them, oh my gosh, it's so worth it. What are
Mhm.
some of the most common mistakes that you see people making, or maybe yourself you've even made when we're first trying to get a handle on that overwhelm?
Oh, 100%. And it's so amazing, Amy. It is nearly everyone makes the same mistake when we are trying to work ourselves out of overwhelm and get our lives organized, get back on track. And that mistake is going straight to our calendar, going straight to our to-do list. I wholeheartedly believe that good time management and a life well lived doesn't start on the pages of our planners, our calendars, or our to do lists. It starts by getting crystal clear about what matters most. And so often when we feel overwhelmed, we want a productivity hack. We want to download a new app, a habit tracker app that we think is, oh, this is it. My life is crazy. So let me download a habit tracker app because surely that's what will get me on track. But we've all done it. We've all been there. Or we go buy a new planner because we think, oh, I'm going to buy a planner. That's what's going to get me organized, which is kind of like when you make the decision to get in shape. So you go buy a ton of like Lululemon to try and like psych yourself up. So we buy a planner and then we buy another planner when that first planner didn't work, because that happens. And so we end up thinking then that we're a hopeless case because the planner didn't work, or the habit tracker didn't work, or we couldn't wake up at 5 a.m. every single morning to do a 7-part morning routine that we read about in a book. I'm not naming names, but they're out there. When really and truly, rearranging the things on our calendar, the productivity hacks, all of that stuff is great, but that's not our first step. That's actually all the way at the end. First, it's deciding what you want your life to look like. Then it's creating a plan to make it happen.
Yeah. It's as simple as that. We're flipping this around. And I think in our consumerism like society where we're just so conditioned for instant results. We're living in
Yes.
that all on demand society. We want results now. And if it doesn't work in the next week, guess what? This thing doesn't work. And we give up on these strategies versus taking the time to ask ourselves those hard questions. And it could be very hard to slow down. I noticed that too. Did you experience that when you were going through that transitional phase of business? Like, it was hard for me to slow down and ask myself, what do I really want? Because I didn't know at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I mean, it was weird. It was
Yeah.
wild. Um, but I've really forced myself to slow down. And I look back on that time of waking up in the mornings, and I would eat breakfast and do a Bible study and go to the gym. And I started to create a routine for myself. And one of the biggest things that I noticed along the way is that so in that exploratory period, I wasn't necessarily planning to start a business. I imagined that I would go back to work full time somewhere else. I was applying for jobs, I was interviewing for jobs and not getting jobs. And the day that I shifted my mindset from I am unemployed to I am starting a business, I didn't know what business it was going to be. I didn't know what was going to happen. But the day that I shifted my mindset away from I am unemployed to I am starting a business, it completely changed the way that I approached my day. And I started to create more structure with how I spent my time in order to in order to create a rhythm. Because we think about toddlers and we think about babies. So I have a 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old right now. So I'm kind of working my way out of that little bitty, that like little stage. But our toddlers thrive on routine. Babies, toddlers, they thrive on routines, that rhythm, because it sets an expectation. It helps their internal body clock stay consistent. And y'all, we're just grown up toddlers. When you really think about it, we are just grown up toddlers. We need consistent rhythms and routines. And routines, half of us are thinking, oh, yeah, I love a routine. And the other half are like, ew, consistency. I don't want a routine. That's boring. I like to do things that are different and be spontaneous. But really, when it comes down to it, even if you don't call it a routine or you don't realize it, you still have them, and it's okay. They're good for you. They help cue your body as to what's coming next. And so setting up routines and starting to be more intentional about how I spent my time. Sure, maybe I had a block of time that was dedicated to searching for and applying for jobs, but I also had a block of time that was dedicated to education and taking courses and trying to figure out what was next. Um, a lot of times when we want to work our way out of overwhelm, we don't yet have the space and the capacity available to even create that vision for what's next. And so much is flying around in our heads. I compare it to dumping out a bucket of ping pong balls and they just kind of fly and bounce everywhere. That's what our brains can feel like when we are so overwhelmed. And so if you're thinking, okay, Anna, I hear you, rearranging my planner is not the answer. Getting another app is not the answer. But how on earth do I create the space to figure out what my vision is? Well, first, we've got to clean out the junk drawer. We've got to take all the stuff that's bouncing around in your head and we've got to get it onto paper. And it's really as simple as that. Giving yourself 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to sit down either with a fresh Google Doc or a blank sheet of paper and let yourself. A lot of people call it a brain dump. I'm not really a big fan of that term because I feel like a brain dump is like dumping a junk drawer out on the floor. I really prefer mind sweep because that's tidy, but but when you're able to get everything out of your head, that which is a major reason why we feel overwhelmed, you're able to start categorizing things and you're able to actually look at all of the different things that are taking up space in your head, and then you can make decisions about them. But when they're just floating around, it's like trying to grab a fog. You can't. And so I mean, if you feel like you don't even have the space to create a vision, give yourself 15 minutes, set a timer, and just download and get things out of your head. And then see what's similar, see what can be delegated, see what you can even completely eliminate because it doesn't matter. And that's going to free up that space to actually give you room to dream and imagine what could be next.
What a great suggestion. I love this idea of the mind sweep because you're right. It is. Everything's so jumbled up. We think that everything's important. So then nothing's important and we have no clue where to start. But I am totally systems and structure. Like I am totally on board with that because what that does is it allows me then to focus.
Mhm.
It allows me to say yes to the things that I want to and no to the things that I don't, because that's important to give ourselves that white space in our calendar. We're
Mhm.
constantly running, 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 running. No wonder we're so overwhelmed. So, by giving ourselves permission to have the time to do this mind sweep, it's powerful because when you
Mhm.
get it out of your head and onto paper, a lot of times it's not as jumbled up as we
Right.
think it is.
Mhm.
Our minds are these bizarre, fascinating things that love to create these stories. But when it comes down to it, we already have all the answers that we're searching for. It's just a matter of quieting the noise so we can actually hear ourselves and figure out what it is that we want. So that's such a great suggestion, great exercise to do. Love that idea. So, one other thing that I want to touch upon is this whole concept of work life balance. It is one of those, you've got people that are like, yes, it is possible. No, it is not possible. What is your take? I would love to know from your perspective,
Yeah.
work life balance, is that possible?
Okay, yes, yes. But here's the thing. Work-life balance is going to look different for literally every person. I like to say that work-life balance is not a formula. It is a feeling. And you know when you have that feeling. And if we're trying, first of all, I will say that 50-50 is not a thing. Like that needs to be one of the biggest misconceptions that is just thrown in the trash is that work-life balance does not mean 50-50, and it should not mean 50-50. And I think that anyone who subscribes to the idea that work-life balance equals 50% work and 50% life, you're never going to achieve that. So I can see why someone might say that work life balance isn't a thing if you are aspiring for 50-50. But when you aspire for a feeling of balance, get really clear with yourself on what that feels like. Does it feel calm and prepared? Do you feel energized? When you are feeling balance, what does that feel like? Because it's not going to be a mathematical equation of hours. It's not going to be this, okay, well, if I spend this much time on work, then I spent, no, it has to do with the energy that we are giving each of these areas of our lives and the quality of the time that we are spending. Did you know that 15 minutes of undivided attention a day is what our children need to feel seen and loved? 15 minutes. That's it. And we think to ourselves, oh, well, that should be easy. But when you really think about like 15 undivided quality minutes with your 6-year old or my 4-year old, it's like you're able to create quality time that really nurtures them in a small window. And maybe you're doing it while they're in the bathtub or while you're doing bedtime stories and you're kind of doubling up. And the thing is that if we think of work and life as being completely and totally separate and these quantifiable hours-based things, we're never going to reach that type of balance. But if you can understand how you want to feel and you call that balance, that can be achieved. And it's going to look different for everyone. I already said that, but it's going to look different every day and in every season. And so if you start out with the goal of, I want to feel calm, prepared, ready for anything. I want to feel like I'm there for my kids, for the people who mean the most to me, then the hours, the minutes, they don't matter because you're showing up the way that you want to show up. So that might be an unexpected take on work-life balance from a time management coach who's telling you that it's not about time. It's about quality. It's about the way you feel. So yes, I believe it's possible.
I love that explanation that work-life balance is a feeling and not a formula. I think that's where, as a society, we've gotten it wrong. We've put it up on this pedestal like it's some goal to be obtained. But in reality, like you said, it's about that quality of the time that we do have. So
Mhm.
say you're working all day, but then you can spend that undivided attention that's totally devoted to your child, to your family, to your spouse, to yourself.
Mhm.
I mean, just think of the changes you could make within that period of time.
Mhm.
So I love that you framed it that way, that it's a feeling and
Mhm.
not a formula.
Right.
And if we lean into that, overwhelm will decrease.
Mhm.
The quality of our relationships will increase
Mhm.
as it gives us back control. It gives
Right.
back our power to
Mhm.
choose and to
Yeah.
choose the life that we want, how we want to feel it, how we want to experience it.
Mhm.
Oh, so good. Anna, this was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing just so many practical strategies that we can start implementing. How can we get into your world and learn more about you?
Yes. Well, first of all, Amy, thank you so much for having me. This has been my pleasure. It's been such a treat to spend time with you and talk time management, work-life balance, all the things. So I would love to invite you to tune into my podcast. It's About Time, a podcast about work, life, and balance. Wherever you listen to podcasts, I have new episodes that go live every single Monday. And if you're feeling that overwhelm, if you are thinking, I want to get out of it, but I want a little bit of help, I've got a free video training called Blueprint to Balance that is designed to take you out of overwhelm and into feeling more organized, calm, prepared, ready for anything. And you can check that out at blueprinttobalance.com. I would be thrilled to know how it goes for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing those awesome resources. Make sure to check out her podcast. It's amazing. And until next time, stop guessing and start growing. Hey, before you go, if you're loving the podcast, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you know a fellow solopreneur who's ready to break through their sales plateau, send this episode their way.